Well, good afternoon and welcome to Live Impact News right here on 13 News Now Plus. Say it with me, it is a Friday. We have reached the end of the week. It is March 20th. A few hours ago, it became officially springtime. I mean, it is a lot of good news here on this particular episode of Live Impact to start our Friday show. We've got 2 hours of news coming for you, but we begin with a little bit of weather. The super producer, the people's producer, the GOAT producer, Nia Campbell is here, as well as superstar meteorologist Hunter Forrest in the building on a Friday. He's got a lovely beachfront behind him that really signifies this warm-up he's about to tell us about. Are those seagulls there?
Those are people.
There's a couple people, but they're surrounded by seagulls, no? No.
There are a few seagulls flying around.
Listen, I get seagulls and people mixed up sometimes, all right? We're all just living beings, right?
That's true.
That's a bunch of seagulls, though, right?
Yeah, and those are waves.
And those are waves, and there's a tanker in the background. I mean, this is
a beautiful shot.
This is springtime personified.
They're like laying out, enjoying the day.
Yeah,
I love that for them.
Most days when we look at the beach over the course of March, we see people walking.
Yes.
This is the first stationary. There are people sitting on the beach, spending real time in front of the water, hanging out with a flock of seagulls.
Yeah.
Yes.
They are having a good spring day.
They are having a good spring day. Now, tell us about the significance of this. Astronomical spring happened at 10:46 a.m.
Yeah.
What does that mean for us?
It just means it's going to get warmer. I know that.
Love that.
I mean, the sun's rays are directly pointing at the equator.
Yes.
At 10:46.
And how does that, so the sun directly on top of the equator?
Pretty much.
And what does that do for our climatal ecosystem?
We're starting to point closer to the sun.
Yes.
So we're just going to get warmer.
Warmer and warmer.
Longer days.
We love to hear it.
You love to hear it. If you're going to Australia, the opposite.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll plan our vacations accordingly.
Yeah.
Now, is this the type of thing where there's going to be any sort of difference in terms of humidity? Is it getting more and more humid along with the warmth?
I mean, yeah, eventually, like as we get deeper into spring and into summer, it will get more humid.
We haven't reached that point yet.
But it's not like the dew points right now are in the 30s.
Does cloud cover change, or is that just random throughout the year?
I mean, you could get definitely more storm clouds.
More storm clouds?
Cumulonimbus
Yes.
type clouds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
As the surface heats up more,
So the spring
gets hotter,
yeah.
you get more rising motion, and those clouds shoot up.
These are the types of things we want to know. We're learning all about weather here. Now, what is the weather outside today?
It's nice. It's beautiful.
Yes.
This is the forecast for the first day of spring. Goodbye, winter. It has not been nice knowing you. 67 degrees for today, mostly sunny. Winds out of the south 5 to 10, gusting to around 20 miles an hour. So a slight breeze out there today. And you may be wondering, how is our first spring weekend of 2026 going to be? Drum roll, please. It's going to be nice.
Love it.
Pretty similar tomorrow. Upper 60s, a good amount of sunshine, a chance for an isolated shower very early Saturday. But other than that, any plans outdoors tomorrow, going to be looking really, really nice and even warmer on Sunday. Upper 70s, pushing 80 degrees. Mostly to partly sunny skies, much warmer compared to the last couple of days. I mean, it has been chilly. One day this week we were 40 only for a high. So luckily, as we enter spring, temperatures getting warmer.
What was that, Tuesday, Monday? About 40 degrees for the high?
I believe Tuesday.
And now, fast forward to Friday, and we're looking at a 78-degree day in our very, very near future.
Right.
The roller coaster continues.
Are you guys going anywhere this weekend?
You asked us that yesterday.
Did I?
Does Hunter actually want to know about our lives?
No.
Or is he just filling the spaces of silence in which we all exist?
I just forget.
Okay, that's fine.
We talk so much just outside of this podcast,
right,
that I forget what I've asked you guys, you know?
Well, the answer is Nia and I both went on vacations last weekend.
Right.
And so this weekend we're here, we're home, we're enjoying Hampton Roads.
Right. And I love that.
For us.
For you guys.
What about yourself? You moving? You shaking?
I'm working. So no.
Okay. So we'll all be here, but we've all got friends throughout the Commonwealth area who will be experiencing hot temperatures, especially Sunday.
Mid to upper 80s, D.C., Richmond, Charlottesville on Sunday. Oof. It's going to be hot. But here is that live view of the beach. Beautiful. It kind of looks like summer outside.
It does. Just looking at that, if this was a window, you would be near certain that it was the middle of June out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. Oh, it's
looks
so
great.
nice. Let me ask you something, Hunter. On Sunday in Virginia Beach, could you reasonably have a beach day, a real beach day with a bathing suit on? Is it too cold? Still a bit too windy for that?
It depends. It's going to be, I think you can.
Right, but it wouldn't be ideal.
I don't think it's going to be I think you could. I mean, the water temperature is still really cold.
You're not going in the water, just
So,
enjoying the sight of it
You
while
just, if
relaxing
you
on
get
the
like a
beach.
slight breeze from the water,
Yeah.
that'll cool you down quick.
Okay. So we're not quite there yet.
I think you could. I think you could try it. I think
We're definitely close.
It'll be a great day to walk the boardwalk and like hit the restaurants.
Yes, that definitely. A walk around outside, a couple of outdoor restaurants, maybe get some tapas, get some appetizers, and enjoy. That part will be fantastic.
You know what place I'm excited to try again this year?
Do tell.
I think I only went once last year.
Okay.
That restaurant that's right on the pier.
Is it Ocean Eddies right there?
I think it
on
might be.
16th Street?
Yeah.
Out at the ocean front? And you can just look out over
Exactly.
the entire beach?
Yeah.
Yes, do it. We should do it.
And
We'll do a
there's-
live Impact News team trip.
And there's like a souvenir shop right there.
Yeah. And then if you keep going, the fishing pier.
Right.
Have you ever been out onto the pier?
I think so.
Okay, you
I
need
think
to-
when I first moved
You got
here.
to pay a couple bucks,
You do.
but it's worth it to get out
It's
there.
worth it.
Yeah. Do you fish, Hunter? Are you a fisher person?
I fished.
Yeah.
I fished actually a good amount growing up.
Okay.
Yeah.
If me, you, and Naya, you, Naya, and I,
Right.
went out to the shoreline and we said, Hunter, you got to teach us how to grab some fish. Could you
Right.
adequately give us a lesson?
I could teach you how to cast.
Yeah. All right. Maybe we'll do a
Real-
little
Ex-
Ocean Eddies /
We could.
fishing trip.
Naya has to take the fish off the hook though.
Okay, Naya, thumbs up if you're in.
I am not in.
That's a thumbs up from Naya.
That's a thumbs up.
Okay, fantastic.
Except I only dealt with freshwater, so it might be, a little different.
We'll have to do some Googling.
We will.
Yeah.
Like freshwater fish is what I dealt. Like there's no like difference. Like
We're picking up what you're putting down.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anywho.
All right. Yeah.
Satellite radar.
Keep it going. We're doing great.
Satellite radar is looking good this afternoon. We are going to be staying nice and dry through this afternoon. Tonight, again, a chance for a few isolated showers, but for most of the day, we're looking good. Upper 60s. Could we reach the lower 70s? Perhaps. But between about 9 and 11 o'clock, a few light showers. But by 10 o'clock, we're already in bed. We're not outside. And then heading into early Saturday morning.
Tucked in, fast asleep by 10 o'clock on a
Tucked
Friday.
in past asleep. Mid to upper 50s Saturday morning, so it's going to be a warmer start to the day. This morning it was chilly.
Yes.
Um,
Brisk.
it was brisk. But tomorrow, more comfortable stepping out early. And then by the afternoon, we're in the upper 60s to low 70s, maybe a few mid 70s further inland. A few clouds rolling on in for the second half of the day, but overall, not bad. And a nice Sunday morning as well, mid to low 50s to start off the day. By the afternoon, upper 70s. Could we get into the low 80s? Perhaps.
Okay.
Mid 80s inland? Certainly.
This always sticks out to me during kind of periods like this. The distinction between Virginia Beach and then Norfolk.
Right.
there.
That's when you get that east wind. It
Yeah.
really can make it feel much colder at the beach.
You drive 30 minutes, you need a whole new outfit.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. That's why it's kind of tough when you ask me that question.
Whether it or not it's a beach day.
Yeah.
Yeah, hard to discern. And maybe something where it's not quite comfortable to be out having a full beach day at the Virginia Beach oceanfront, but if you're laying on the grass over at Town Point Park in Norfolk, maybe it's
Yeah.
a little warmer, it's a
little
little
warmer.
bit more comfortable. So it depends on where you're at in the Hampton Roads. That is the feature of covering such a large
Yeah.
region.
For sure. And then by Sunday night, I mean, look at this, 9 o'clock. I love that. When it's 9 o'clock and it's still in the low 70s.
Yes, we love a warm spring night.
A warm spring night, a
Mm-hmm.
warm spring morning, and a hot spring afternoon.
Yes, perfection. We did it. Meteorological and astronomical spring, both here. We have officially arrived.
You love to see
And
it.
even Nia Campbell has said she is okay with the warmer temps
Right.
coming our way.
One thing I did want to talk about, though,
Yeah.
this is kind of off track a little bit.
We never do that.
We've never been off track ever. But look at the highs yesterday. 105 degrees in Phoenix, right? 95 in Las Vegas. 85 degrees in Denver. The day before that, I believe it was like 102 in Phoenix, and that was the earliest 100-degree day they've ever seen. Normally, they see it in early May-ish is their first 100-degree day. I think they beat the record by like over a week for their earliest, but on average, they see it in May. But the last 2 days, they've been well over 100 degrees. It has been, they are breaking records out west. It is so hot. Las Vegas, I believe, hit their warmest March day ever recorded. Same with Phoenix. I mean, it's just been super, super hot. So that's like kind of one of the big weather stories out there over the last couple of days. Because I know it's been quiet here the last few days, besides Monday. But I just wanted to throw that out there. I mean, look at Bismarck, North Dakota yesterday, 75 degrees.
Yeah.
That is warm for them.
They're breaking records on the East Coast. And from Norfolk to Phoenix, a 54-degree difference.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I
Isn't
mean,
it?
more than double the temperature here just heading out to Phoenix.
Yeah.
And you said they're breaking records by a solid week, the earliest they've gone over 100.
Yes.
Man.
Which is pretty intense. Not only their first 100, but I believe like the hottest it's ever been in March. And like they're beating their average by like a month and a half. So it's insane heat.
Yeah. Now, what kind of negative consequences could that have on sort of the agriculture in Phoenix? I mean, is that something that is of concern?
I mean, well, the ski resorts out there are closing early, which is not great because it's already been a super, super warm winter.
Right.
So they've been having a tough time out there. But even at night, temperatures, are well above freezing, so they can't make any snow.
Yeah.
So they're closing very early this year.
So there are some
unfortunately.
businesses being impacted. Seasonal workers who are going to get, 1 or 2 less weeks of pay than they anticipated.
And also, like, through the summer, a lot of places out west rely on the snowpack from the winter that builds up through the mountains. And they didn't see a whole lot this year. The snowpack, well below average. So that affects water supply, wildfire risk, all of that. So certainly something to watch out for, as we get into the summer months and into the fall, what kind of impacts we'll see from this. But hopefully it'll work out. But yeah, certainly isn't great. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
We'll be looking out west to see what kind of records they're breaking. Meanwhile, back east, closer to normal.
So on Monday, we are going to see a cold front rolling on in. Could bring us a few isolated showers, but overall, not looking too bad. But some cooler air will be coming on in. So it's not going to stay super warm forever. By Tuesday, we'll be in the low 50s for a high. So it'll be chillier again. We should be around 61 degrees for this time of year, but we'll get back to average and even above average by the middle and end of next week. And even before the cold front pushes in on Monday, we'll still be pretty warm into the low 70s. So a couple days of some warmer temps, not looking too bad. But again, for today, we're in the upper 60s, mostly sunny. Looking pretty good. A great first day of spring. Tomorrow, this is saying mid to low 60s. I think we'll be a bit warmer than that, but it's going to be a good amount of sunshine. A great first spring weekend. 78 on Sunday, 73 on Monday with a chance for a shower as the cold front moves in. We drop into the low 50s by Tuesday, and then we're in the mid to low 60s Wednesday and Thursday.
You love it when it just matches up like that. It turns to spring, and we have a very springish day.
Correct. Yeah, I agree.
We love to see it.
You'll love to see it.
Now, talk to me about the rest of your schedule here. Are we going to see you at 4 o'clock again?
I will be here at 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Back-to-back days on the 4
know.
o'clock for Hunter Force.
It's a big day.
And how did it feel being back, in the evenings?
It's nice.
Yeah. You miss your morning crew?
I love the mornings, and I love getting out at 1:15 in the afternoon.
Especially on a Friday. It is
Especially
nice.
on a Friday.
I know. But
it's okay because I get to spend it with you. And is Janet here today? or
Janet
no?
is here today.
Is it you
I
and Janet?
just saw Janet not too long ago.
Okay, because I also think I saw Madison on the anchor list as well, so I wasn't sure.
Oh.
She's filling in for Dana, so Madison will be 6
Okay.
and 11, I believe.
Madison Schlegel on at 6 and
5,
11.
6, and
Keep an
11.
eye out for that. 5, 6, and 11.
Yeah.
Shout out to the weekend team, Hunter and Madison, making their way to 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah,
Great to see you guys.
we're happy to. What was I trying to say? We're happy to be here.
And that is a fitting end to Hunter Force Forecast
I was
here
like-
on Live Impact News.
I
It's good that
couldn't
Naya
even.
kept the graphic up because Hunter kind of short-circuited
I
there
literally
on
was
air
like,
for a second.
we're happy to.
Yeah, he did. He did.
That's
He
what I
just
looked
lost
like.
it completely. That is what we call a Friday, ladies and gentlemen. But no worries, because coming up in the rest of the show, we have plenty more to explore. We've got a live guest planned for you today, and we have some live events that we're monitoring, and we're going to go through it all over the course of the next hour and 43 minutes. So we will see you right after this commercial break when we dive into the headlines of the day. Please stay with us. All right, welcome back to Live Impact News. What we're going to do here to sort of start the news portion of our show is we're going to once again do sort of a daily update on the war in Iran. Let's start with the fact that a United States official has confirmed that 3 more warships and roughly 2,500 more Marines are now bound for the Middle East. The U.S. military says it has about 50,000 troops in the Middle East. Now remember, the Pentagon requested another $200 billion to fund the war yesterday. That was kind of the centerpiece of our reporting yesterday. That funding would need congressional approval. Now, it is noted here in this update that the United States national debt has hit a record $39 trillion. Now, if you remember, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was giving a press conference yesterday that we actually listened in on live. He was not speaking in English at that time, so we moved on to other stories. But he did relay on Thursday that Iran no longer has the ability to enrich uranium or make ballistic missiles. That is a report from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. United States leaders have said that all of these U.S. strikes, multiple weeks of United States strikes, have decimated Iran's military. Now, there's little information that has come from Iran directly about damage to its weapons and energy facilities since the war began nearly 3 weeks ago. Now, Netanyahu also said that Israel will refrain from any further attacks on the Iranian gas field at the request of United States President Trump. If you remember, we read to you here on Live Impact that Truth Social post from President Trump yesterday, basically insinuating that these strikes on oil fields need to stop. Iran responded to Israel's attack on that field, which Iranians depend on for their electricity, by intensifying their targeting of energy infrastructure in other Middle East countries. All of this comes as us here back in the United States continue to keep an eye on prices at the pump. That is a phrase that you will hear often throughout this conflict, and that all sort of, it is a web where there is that trickle-down effect of you see attacks back and forth in the Gulf, and that trickles down and ends up here in potential rises in gas prices. So those are all things that we are sort of keeping an eye on as we continue to report on the war in Iran. We talked yesterday about the death toll. Just for emphasis, we will once again go over the fact that more than 1,300 people in Iran have been killed during the war. Israeli airstrikes have killed over 1,000 people in Lebanon and displaced more than 1 million, according to the Lebanese government. In Israel, 15 people have been killed by Iranian missile fire, and at least 13 U.S. military members have been killed. 4 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank were killed Wednesday as Israel and Iran exchanged airstrikes. So let's make sure we don't have any other pertinent updates that we need to get to before we move forward with some of our coverage here. I'm just doing a brief look at my notes at some of the different articles that we're referring to. And okay, let's move forward here and at least check in on a live event. We don't know if we'll be able to hear anything in particular, but we do know that the Senate is debating the SAVE Act on one of our live feeds. We're not sure if it is ongoing in an active manner, but we are going to listen in. The SAVE Act, of course, legislation that is attempting to require more identification for voter registration and for the act of voting itself. Let's listen in and see if we can hear any ongoing debate right now. All right, back here in the Live Impact studio, as you can see, we're not able to actively listen in on any debate that's happening right now. But if we do get a chance to listen to Republicans and Democrats going back and forth regarding the SAVE Act, the voter identification legislation, we will certainly take a listen. We'll be keeping a sharp eye out for that as we progress through our stream. In the meantime, earlier today, President Trump spoke at a Navy event. So let's go ahead and listen to a portion of that recorded speech from earlier on this Friday.
Thank you very much, please. I want to begin by just saying we're doing extremely well in Iran. The difference between them and us is they had a Navy 2 weeks ago, they have no Navy anymore. It's all at the bottom of the sea. 58 ships knocked down in 2 days. And we have the greatest Navy anywhere in the world. It's not even close. So we are doing really well. We're not going to let them have nuclear weapons. Because if they had them, they'd use them, and we're not going to let that happen. It should have been done a long time ago by other presidents. So it's an honor to be here. This is fun. And these are great athletes standing behind me. Great coaches, general managers, great people, and a great superintendent. Hello, Superintendent. We only put our finest as these superintendents for these great schools because we don't want to have somebody that they don't look up to. We take our best, and they're really amazing. For the second year in a row, it's my great honor to officially present the Commander-in-Chief's Trophy to the one and only Navy midshipman football team, with 11 wins and 2 losses, playing the best teams in football. And I used to always think of the military services. They played like a little step below. They played the big teams and they beat them. These players achieved one of the most impressive seasons in Navy football history and any football history, frankly. And I just want to congratulate the midshipmen. I met them backstage and they're great. Thank you. Congratulations. Mentioned the Navy that we just destroyed, I said, are they good ships? Yeah, they're great ships. And I said, why didn't we save them? We could have used them ourselves. They said the difference was they didn't know how to use them. Right, General? They didn't know how to use them. They had no idea. But I want to recognize Navy Athletic Director Michael Kelly, who has just done an incredible job. Thank you very much. Along with head coach Brian Newberry, fantastic coach, right? The second best start for any football coach in school history. What's second? Who's first? That must have been a Roger Staubach here, maybe, or something. Because I tell you what, I got to watch Roger Staubach, and he was something. It was like, I have to say, I said it, and some people were insulted by it, but it was like a man playing with children. He would single-handedly win those games. It was incredible. Thanks as well to your superintendent, Lieutenant General Michael Borg-Schulte, who is an accomplished Navy linebacker, a very good one. Back in the day, we're also pleased to be joined by Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. Now, I don't know if he's here because I actually told him he had an option, be in the sit room, you know, the famous situation, but be up here. And if it's okay, I told him, but I think he has 2 very beautiful sons up here. They're the best. Boone and Jackson. Are you 2 guys? Well, I told your father, just be in the situation room. We're okay with that, right? I think so. Right, Coach? Coach, I think you're okay. So Boone and Jackson, someday you'll be on this team maybe, right? Would you be on Navy, Army, Air Force? Which one? Take Navy. Just say Navy. Okay. I don't want to get them in trouble. And your father's doing a fantastic job. And also the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane. So Dan is unbelievable, and I picked him for a reason because I was told it would take 5 years to beat ISIS by our television generals. You know, there's a big difference between generals, just like there is between coaches and everything else. They said, sir, 5 years, and I went to Iraq because I didn't understand why 5 years, and I met this general, and his name was Dan Kane. I said, what's your name? He said, Raisin, sir. I said, really, Raisin? What is that? Raisin? Oh, it's just my nickname, sir. What's your last name? Kane. I said, your name's Raisin Kane? You're the guy I'm looking for. And it turned out to be right. So they told me it was going to take 4 to 5 years to knock out ISIS. And now I'm in Iraq. I come down and meet him, some other generals, he was the boss. And I said, how long would it take for you to knock out ISIS? He said, 4 weeks, sir. I said, 4 weeks? They tell me 4 years, maybe 5. He said, well, whatever they want, sir. They're the boss. I'm just here. But you can do it in 4 weeks, sir. And you'll have time left over. I said, you gotta be kidding. And he explained that we went through a whole big thing. Well, nobody in this room would be bored by it. Actually, it might be every word of the day, every word of it. But bottom line, I said, let me go back. But as I'm leaving, it was very interesting. I'm walking down the stairs, long fight. I had to turn off the lights after spending trillions of dollars. You had to turn the lights off in the plane because you didn't want to be spotted by the enemy. This was something, so we land. And he said, sir, would you like to rest for a while before we have a meeting? I said, I don't have to rest. My name's not Biden. I'm not resting. And we had great meetings. And then I got back in the plane and I said to him, so General, you say 4 weeks, we mean 4 weeks, sir, and you'll have time left over. I said, I'll call you on Monday when I get back. And I called him, I said, you still feel that way, General? He said, yes, sir. And I let him do it. He did it in less than 4 weeks. He defeated ISIS. It was amazing. What a difference. You know, I always say, what a difference the president makes. The border, They said, it can't be done without Congress. It will take years. We did it in about 3 weeks. We have a border that's now 9 months in a row. Nobody's come into our country illegally. I'm not even sure if that could be right. But the Democrats keep the stats. So they say, I mean, they have 0 people came in through our border. You see it, right? And I said, the president makes a big difference. Well, the generals make a big difference too. But I told him, I said, Dan, if you don't mind, stay in the Situation Room and you watch all those attacks that we're hitting those guys with. And they don't know what's happening. Their Navy's gone, their Air Force is gone, their anti-aircraft is all gone, it's all gone. Their radar is all gone. Their leaders are all gone. The next set of leaders are all gone. And the next set of leaders are mostly gone. And now nobody wants to be a leader over there anymore. We're having a hard time. We want to talk to them, and there's nobody to talk to. We have nobody to talk to. And you know what? We like it that way. And we have many other distinguished members of the United States military, but I want to tell you, Hexeth is doing a great job. And Raising Cane is doing a great job, as good as anybody's ever seen. Don't forget, we had Venezuela. That was the beginning where people started to see the talent. I rebuilt the military and built it, frankly, including Space Force. But I rebuilt the military in my first term. I didn't think I'd be using it this much, but I'm glad I rebuilt it because we can't let these lunatics have nuclear weapons because they were going to use them. They'd use them fast. One of the ways you know that is when this whole thing started, they started shooting missiles all over the Middle East at countries that were basically not involved because they wanted to take over the Middle East. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they would have used it. The only question would have been the first hour or the first day. That's the only question. They would have used it. And if they can use a nuclear weapon, the world would have been in big trouble. We had to stop. It should have been done long ago. I also want to thank FCC Chairman Brendan Carr, perhaps the most powerful man in this room. You are doing some job. He's trying to keep the fake news. He's trying to make the fake news real and respect it again, which is not an easy job, but you're doing a really amazing job. First time that's happened in 25 years. So I congratulate you and everybody in the room. Everybody in this whole country is watching what you're doing, and we appreciate it. When a man can get elected in a landslide, winning think of it, 7 swing states, win them all. We win the popular vote. We win the electoral college by a tremendous amount. We win the counties by 82 or 84%. And I got no good press. Think of it. Only one thing, that only means one thing. These people are not respected. They're just not respected, and we have to have a press that's respected. When you can win an election where they say that I got 94% bad press, think of it, the other side got 94% good press. When they can get 94% and you win in a landslide, that means the press is not respected. People have no confidence in. So you're doing a fantastic job. Senators Todd Young and Dan Sullivan, great senators, wherever you may be. You're here someplace. Where are you? Hello, fellas. Good senators. Great guys. And Representatives Ronnie Jackson, White House doctor. He served 3 presidents. He said he had Barack Hussein Obama. Have you heard of Barack Hussein Obama? You had Obama. I didn't want to talk about Biden, but he said, and you had Bush. You had young Bush, I call him, young Bush. I was not a fan, but that's all right. But the press asked him, who was the healthiest of the 3? Dr. Ronnie, stand up, Dr. Ronnie. There's a big deal. Took a lot of heat for this. They said, no, most guys would say, well, we don't want to talk about that. They said, who's the healthiest of the 3? He said, President Donald J. Trump by far. If he didn't eat junk food, he'd live to 200 years old, he said. And I love this guy, and he then left and he ran. He was an admiral, and he then left, and he was a White House doctor, a very respected one. He saved a lot of lives. He was a great doctor. People don't realize that. And he then left, and he said, sir, I'd like to run for Congress. I said, you've never done it before. You won't be able to pull it off. In a very, very all-Trump district, there were 28 people running. Man was retiring. He's been there for years. And I said, Ron, I don't know. It's going to be tough, but we'll try it, right? And we got him in. He blew him away. There was one man that was favored. He was a rhino. He was favored to win easily. and we wiped him out, right, Ron? And he's been a congressman. He's one of the most popular people in Congress. But I don't care about that. I just care that he was my doctor, and he said I'm the healthiest human being he's ever. Ronnie, am I healthier than these guys back here?
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. All right. See, this is why I like him. Also with Ronnie is Derek Van Orden, a fantastic guy, and members of the Naval Academy's Board of Visitors. Sean Spicer has gone on to great things, and Walt Nuda. Walt, where's Walt? Walt's become a very famous guy. He works with me, and he does a great job. Great, loyal, incredible person. And Sean Spicer, where's Sean? Where's Sean? Great job, and he's got a very successful television career going. What the hell do I get out of it? Well, you know what? I get nice statements. That's what I get out of it, right?
Yes, sir. 100%.
It's great. You've done great. Thank you very much. Congratulations. Those are really the people that are very much in charge of making everything work at the academy and the other academies separately, separate groups. A very important position. For the Navy midshipmen, 2025 was truly a season for the ages. You didn't just win the Commander-in-Chief's trophy, you made history as one of the greatest teams to ever wear the proud uniform of Navy football, some uniform. The teams have gotten so good in the schools that I was able to get, and we're pushing it very hard to make it permanent, a military academy deferment policy. So, because you have some people here, you know, when I went on the field and I threw up a coin, I'm standing next to these guys. They were monsters. I said, look at the size of these guys. I thought they were supposed to be smaller. I thought you had sort of restrictions on size, you know?
Okay, so President Donald Trump speaking at a Army event earlier today, and we do know that over the course of this event, an executive order was presented that would basically preserve the Army-Navy game, known as America's game. It's a college football game, and it would preserve the time slot for that game, essentially. So this would, now the recent and potentially ongoing expansion of the college football playoffs and other postseason college football games threatens to encroach upon the second Saturday in December, a date traditionally reserved for that Army-Navy game. Such scheduling conflicts weaken the national focus on our military service academies. Accordingly, it is the policy of the United States that no college football game, specifically the college football playoff or other postseason games, be broadcast in a manner that directly conflicts with the Army-Navy game. So that's an executive order from President Trump preserving that Army-Navy game time slot. Typically in the past, it's been the only game of that day, and it's kind of drawn exponential national attention relative to other Army and Navy football games. It's also a storied rivalry, so President Trump preserving the time slot of that game. College football playoff currently stands at 8 teams. They are looking to add more teams to that college football playoff. That's been the reports, at least. So the rapidly changing nature of college sports continues right before our eyes. Of course, we are in the midst of the NCAA tournament right now as we speak. There are multiple games going on. Those first 2 days, Thursday, Friday, and then even Saturday, Sunday, there are college football games nonstop from noon until almost midnight. Nonstop college basketball. It is fantastic. Currently, Kentucky up by 2 on Santa Clara. Texas Tech up by 5 on Akron. Both those games ongoing. If you want to check on your brackets on this Friday afternoon, please don't forget to do so. Now, what we're going to do here on Live Impact News, we're not going to check our brackets. Rather, we're going to check in with a commercial break, and then when we come back, we have a very special guest who will be joining us to discuss some unfortunate celebrity news. Stay with us. All right, we welcome you back to Live Impact News, 1:44 p.m. on this Friday, March 20th, and we begin this segment by reporting sad news out of Hollywood, I suppose, or just out of the world of celebrity in general, and that is that Chuck Norris has passed away at the age of 86. Now, it's hard to just put Chuck Norris in the Hollywood box because his resume is astoundingly diverse. He was an armed services veteran, a martial arts champion, a movie action star, and then eventually an internet meme, one of the kind of early internet memes even by my judgment. He was also had a hit TV show that ran for nearly a decade, so Chuck Norris, no short list of the things he was involved in and the things he accomplished, again, has passed away at the age of 86. And with that news, we welcome in Will Harris, a pop culture journalist. He's going to join us now to kind of break down the life and career of Chuck Norris. Will, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. How's everything with you?
I'm doing great, but I appreciate it, even if it is under sad circumstances.
It is. We wish you were we were welcoming you under a more celebratory moment here. But Chuck Norris's life certainly had a lot of celebration within it. I'm wondering if you can just give a sense to begin with of the place he held in American culture with such a varied resume. You know, what did he mean sort of to the American populace? And maybe that differs by generation.
Well, as you mentioned offhandedly, first and foremost, he was an Air Force vet. He joined in '58, was discharged in '62 as an airman first class. So he served his country before he ever became an actor. But before Hollywood came calling, he'd already opened his first martial arts studio. He had won the All-American Karate Championship in '67 and '68. But it was finally in '68 when he made his way into actually a Dean Martin spy comedy called The Wrecking Crew as an uncredited extra. And then '72, Bruce Lee gave him what you'd probably call his first real acting debut in The Way of the Dragon. And from there, it was all immediately just, he became a superstar by the mid-'70s.
And is there something about that time period in cinema that lent itself to someone with Chuck Norris's background becoming a star? You mentioned Bruce Lee, another person whose background had a lot of variance and who was able to become a superstar. What was Hollywood like in that time that allowed for figures like Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee to become massive movie stars?
I guess you could argue the phrase at the time was kung fu. I mean, that's what really had become a huge deal in pop culture. And then Bruce Lee, as I say, gave Chuck Norris his start, and then Bruce Lee passed away far too young. But by then, Chuck was on his way up. And I believe it was '77 when he made his first leading role in Breaker Breaker. And because of that background he had in karate, he was able to also serve as fight choreographer. And then it just, from there, it was bam, bam, bam. It was Good Guys Wear Black was '78, A Force of One '79, The Octagon '80, Eye for an Eye '81, and once it got into the '80s, it was, if not one, two movies a year, all of them huge box office successes.
And you mentioned how he was also able to be a coordinator there, that kind of able to do multiple things, due again to that very sort of varied resume of skills. I'm wondering, what was the perception of him as an actor? How did people view his presence and his films, and maybe even what were his strengths as a performer?
I mean, as an actor, one might argue that he was great at karate, but he had
Right.
charisma, and that'll take you a long way in this business, obviously. I think, in particular, the Missing in Action series in the '80s, Cable certainly helped a lot with his career, giving him regular airplay, so to speak, throughout pop culture. I mean, he had the Missing in Action trilogy, it became. He had two Delta Force movies, and by the late '80s, he was actually the star of his own cartoon for kids, the Karate Commandos, Commandos with a K.
Again, so many different things that he was able to do, so many different avenues where he was able to be successful. Now, can we kind of walk through a little bit? He becomes a major action star with a lot of box office hits, and he moves on to do Walker, Texas Ranger. When we talk about Walker, Texas Ranger, it's a show that, for me growing up, it was I just knew that it existed. I don't know that I ever even totally watched an episode, but I was just aware of that show's existence. What place did that show hold, and just what kind of television program was it?
Well, it's interesting because it was a career evolution from the 80s where he was this huge box office star. And then the early 90s, it started to slow down, but he was becoming more of a family kind of a star. He did like a movie called Sidekicks, where it was Tim teaming up with a young karate star. He did Top Dog, where it was him and a dog. And then 93 is when he started Walker, Texas Ranger. And it then ran for 200 episodes. And it was a huge mainstream hit, but at the same time, it seemed to be almost a punchline. I mean, it literally was a punchline for Late Night with Conan O'Brien, where he proceeded to have a lever where he would pull just to get a random Walker Texas Ranger clip to show, with no context whatsoever, which made it all the funnier.
Right. And only serves to amplify and grow the legend of Chuck Norris. The first place that I ever saw him, and this is just strictly due to generation, was on Dodgeball. Dodgeball was the first place where I ever saw Chuck Norris. And of course, I didn't have any real context for why his appearance there was so funny. But it was the first place I saw him, and I learned a lot more about him after that happened. Did he have, what was his, he has Walker, Texas Ranger, and he kind of moves to a different phase of his career. And then there was a different kind of renaissance. Can you describe where things progressed as we sort of move into the early and mid 2000s?
He became literally a joke, not in the sense that people were making fun of him per se, but as in he was the toughest guy. And these jokes, I wish I had pulled a handful just to relate to you right this second, but everybody had one. There were books of them, literally. And it reached the point where, honestly, when he entered the hospital yesterday, it was like Chuck Norris has entered the hospital. The hospital is reported to be in serious condition. I mean, literally up to the very end, it was still a great punchline, and it was at anyone else's expense but Chuck Norris.
Yeah, I did pull up a couple here, just a very brief search. Chuck Norris doesn't sleep, he waits. When the boogeyman goes to sleep every night, he checks his closet for Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris doesn't do push-ups. He doesn't push himself up. He pushes the earth down. And maybe my favorite on this list, Chuck Norris can slam a revolving door. So it just on and on like that. It really did become Chuck Norris makes onions cry. It just he became a very early meme. And just from the reading that I've done today, he also really kind of embraced that. He didn't push back against this new evolution of his stardom. He sort of embraced it. Can you speak to the fact that he was, as you said, one of the toughest guys on earth in the 80s and the 90s, but then he's also the type of person who can be a part of this new sort of thing where he is allowing himself to be in on the joke? I mean, what does that say about sort of his, again, just his persona?
Well, I mean, I think it speaks to a lot the fact that as he grew older, he was able to, for one thing, embrace that, and therefore, in a sense, he was out there in the general public, in the pop culture landscape, without actually having to do a whole lot the older he got. He could actually kind of relax and enjoy the benefits of his past success. Occasionally, he'd pop up and, like, he was on an episode of Hawaii Five-0, and just a quick cameo. He popped up in, I think, The Expendables 2, also just a short appearance, but just enough to remind people this guy was a massive action star, just like the rest of the people who were in these films. But he had a sense of humor about it. He was happy to make reference to it when he made some appearances here and there as himself. And I think even though he had effectively stopped working right around 2000, 2001, he was still showing up in various things online and had a very strong presence even now.
And we talked about Kung Fu a little bit, but I also, and again, let me know if maybe I'm too scattered with my eras, but I think of Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Van Damme, Seagal, Chuck Norris. I kind of, for me, as a child of the 90s and the 2000s, I have this holy grail of a certain type of action star that is if still in existence, certainly different in how it looks and different in the amount of roles that there are now for that type of star. What was that era? Those action stars who were larger than life, who were, unbeatable in hand-to-hand combat, who would go in and rescue a whole town. What was that era? How would you describe that era of Hollywood?
Oh, it was a glorious, glorious time, let me tell you. I mean, honestly, it was great because you could always count on a Chuck Norris movie. Literally, like as I was saying, it was either at least one, if not two movies a year for more than a decade, or better part of 2 decades, honestly. And he also, Norris stands out as being one of the very few action stars who was able to take his big screen success and transfer it to the small screen. Because, like I say, Walker Texas Ranger lasted for the better part of a decade, and you really don't see any other examples of film stars being able to make that kind of a jump at that time of their career. They usually will struggle through a period of direct-to-video films, and that's definitely something that, I mean, Chuck Norris did do that. There's like one or two films in the late 90s, early 2000s that he was doing simultaneous to Walker. But for the most part, he was a huge TV star at that point and didn't even have to do film, really.
It certainly, we keep coming back to this sort of adaptability that he had, which I think in some ways defines some of his success. Adaptability, charisma. He really had all of that in spades. Is there anything else that you want to touch on about Chuck Norris, either Chuck Norris, the actor, the martial artist, or Chuck Norris, the sort of mythical figure that he became? Anything else that we need to know on this, on a very sad day of his passing, but anything else to celebrate his life?
I mean, as someone who grew up in the 70s, I very distinctly remember the Chuck Norris Karate Studio over at Janif, where I was always, as a kid, too intimidated to dare go and take lessons, but I would like win them at various kid events. It was like, get a free lesson at Chuck Norris Karate Studios. So I mean, that he was a formidable figure even before I was able to see any of his films. He'd kind of just embraced the pop culture position that he had even then. And like I say, between the films and the TV series and even the animated series, which I think is available on DVD if you actually go searching for it, he managed to infiltrate all parts of the pop culture landscape, and as a result, he is a legit legend.
Yeah, Will Harris, wonderful to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us to talk about this. We are in the last 6 months strike me as unique, and I don't think it's recency bias to say that there has been more loss of true Hollywood icons here in the last few months than maybe any time I can remember. If we talk Robert Duvall, Robert Redford, Rob Reiner, Diane Keaton, Chuck Norris, even going back to Gene Hackman, that's a little bit before, but is that fair to say? I mean, it has been really it really stuck out during the Oscars, during the in memoriam section, that massive
the same thing.
icons.
Yeah, the Oscars, it really was just a punch in the gut to realize how much loss we'd experienced in pop culture over the course of just that last year. And then you even had people like James Van Der Beek and Eric Dane. I mean, people who were obviously known more for television, but still they had major footprints on the landscape, and just that sense of loss is palpable.
It is palpable indeed. It is a very a tragic time in Hollywood in so many ways, but so many people who we also have left indelible marks of art and creativity that we can kind of forever look back on. Will Harris, can't tell you how much we appreciate it. I see what I believe is a Permian Panthers helmet in the background of your office there.
I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about. No, yeah, absolutely it is. I'm a TV critic, and I went to a press tour at one point, and they were literally was sitting on the table. I'm like, well, I'm going to have to bring that home on the flight somehow. And I did.
That's a great piece of memorabilia. I'm sure we'll have plenty more to discuss. Hopefully, we can have you back on under happier circumstances. But for the time being, thank you so much for joining us to talk about the passing of Chuck Norris. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, sir. That is Will Harris, a special day here for us on Live Impact to be able to have someone who can accurately kind of give us more insight into Chuck Norris's life and career, especially a life and career that stretched for so long and included so many different eras. So we really appreciate having Will on here to talk to us a little bit about that. And rest in peace to Chuck Norris. And of course, all thoughts are with his family and loved ones on a difficult day like today. All right, now we move forward here on Live Impact News, 1:58 p.m. We've got another hour or so of show to go. We still have multiple live events that we are monitoring. The debate continues in Congress regarding the SAVE Act, though it does not look like they've yet reached a point where we would actually be able to listen in on any debate. Now, what we did do was we did record some of the debate from earlier in the day. So perhaps at some point we will be able to go back and parse through our recording and find some spots that we want to kind of go over here at the very least. So that's something that we're going to keep an eye on and that we're going to refer back to at some point here in the next hour of our stream. For the time being, let's go over something that we talked about quite a bit yesterday. Let's go ahead and talk once again about Markwayne Mullin. Markwayne Mullin, of course, is the congressman who was nominated to take over the Department of Homeland Security following the departure of Kristi Noem, following Kristi Noem being let go from that position by Donald Trump and the Trump administration. So yesterday, Markwayne Mullin's nomination advanced to the full Senate. It advanced out of a small Senate committee and into the full Senate, despite opposition from Republican Rand Paul. He did receive a confirmation vote from Democrat John Fetterman out of Pennsylvania. He was able to move forward to the full Senate by an 8-7 vote after a hearing on Wednesday. So this will now go to the full Senate. His nomination moves on in Congress. Of course, the Department of Homeland Security now in the 35th day of its funding lapse. We do know that currently at this time, there are issues with the TSA, issues with TSA agents who are not getting paid. We have a shot here of the airport in Atlanta just to kind of show a little bit of how much of a backup there is. Now, Atlanta is a very busy airport, and we can only show you the live look that we have. Frankly, we don't know what a regular Friday of travel in the Atlanta airport looks like, but we do know that TSA agents have been calling out due to not being paid, and we do see this major backup with people barely moving in Atlanta. And, you can certainly draw your own conclusions to those two facts. So the ascension of a new Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security comes at a critical time with that funding lapse ongoing and TSA agents not being paid once again. If you remember in the record-breaking government shutdown that we had late in 2025, TSA agents not being paid, and now we come to a situation where TSA agents once again not being paid, but this time, rather than a full government shutdown, it's just the Department of Homeland Security. So Markwayne Mullin now moving forward to the next step of his confirmation hearing. Again, he would be, if he is confirmed, replacing Kristi Noem, who was fired by Donald Trump from her position of the Secretary of Homeland Security, moved to a different and new position, but let go from her position at the Department of Homeland Security. Now, I wonder if we can take one more listen in here on the debate that rages on about the SAVE Act, a debate that we expect to take quite some time. We weren't able to hear yesterday. Let's go ahead and see if we can hear today. Let's take another brief listen. Okay, so as you can hear, once again, we cannot listen in on this debate. We do see representatives on the floor, but we're unable to listen. So what we'll do instead is we will listen to Virginia Senator Mark Warner, who gave a media press availability for Virginia media yesterday. Obviously a lot to discuss, and so we're going to listen in on Senator Warner as he spoke yesterday.
Relatively busy Capitol. Never a dull day here. I want to start with the Intelligence Committee hearing we had yesterday that was in the open. This is called the Worldwide Threats Assessment. It is the one time a year where the leadership of our intelligence community comes in public to report to my committee as well as to Congress and the public at large about the state of threats to our nation. I'm going to focus on two items that came out of yesterday's hearing. First, one of the areas that I've been extraordinarily concerned about for some time is the security of our elections this year. I'm concerned about foreign influence coming into our election. I'm concerned about the administration itself undermining the integrity of our election when President Trump says, we ought to have the feds take over elections, or Republicans should run all the elections. Clearly counter to what a free and open process would be. One of my focuses has been on Tulsi Gabbard, who is the Director of National Intelligence, someone I didn't think was competent for this position, and voted against her, and everything, her actions since then have confirmed the validity of my vote. You may recall a while back, Tulsi Gabbard, whose job it is to look at, as our nation's top spy, look at foreign countries interfering in our elections. Instead, she's inserted herself into domestic policy when there was a search warrant given to collect some of the ballots from Fulton County, Georgia, Atlanta, about the 2020 election. Somehow she appeared with the FBI where she had no business of being there. I pressed her on that yesterday. She said the president had ordered her to go there, requested her to go there to observe. Well, that's not her job. And this whole seeking after the 2020 ballots was based on an affidavit from a bunch of debunked theories about the 2020 election that had been litigated and resolved many times. Matter of fact, the Republican Secretary of State in Georgia had said that elections were safe. The fact that she was down there observing or potentially whether she touched or dealt with the ballots, it gravely concerned me. And we've now got a very mixed message that she said the president requested her, ordered her there. The president, subsequent to that action, said he didn't know she was going to be there, or Pam Bondi, the attorney general, ordered her to go there. This is still, there's a lot of smoke and concern about her activities focusing on domestic activities when she should be focused on foreign threats. And on the question of foreign threats, she has completely missed her duty to report to the committee about any of these foreign threats. She has not made any of the statutorily required reports. And matter of fact, this was the first worldwide threat hearing since 2017 that didn't even list foreign interference as a priority. And finally, in testimony, she and others, including the CIA director, indicated, yes, our adversaries are still trying to interfere in our elections. This is a dereliction of duty. It is incompetence. And it is, again, my fear, the beginning of an effort to potentially have either a raw piece of intelligence used as a smokescreen to federalize these elections, since I believe in many ways this president will do almost anything to maintain power, since I think the American people are not supporting his policies. The second half of, and two other items out of that hearing. One was, we also raised the concerns with Director Kash Patel, who's fired most of the top counterterrorism, counterespionage, cyber folks within the FBI. We've had 25% in many field offices of FBI agents taken off of things like counterterrorism that might have been able to prevent the awful shooting we saw at ODU a week ago. They've been taking those agents off of those duties and put on immigration enforcement where their skills are not being used. And we also raised the questions about Kash Patel taking FBI resources to buy a fancy plane and fly his girlfriend around, and also for him being off, partying with athletes in Milan and elsewhere. And at the same time, the FBI budget has been cut about $500 million. I think inappropriate at the best. And then we did press Director Gabbard and others on the state of the Iran war. Tulsi Gabbard has been a long-time advocate against foreign involvement. Matter of fact, her former top deputy, Joe Kent, resigned earlier this week. He was head of the Counterterrorism Center because he thought that there was no imminent threat posed by Iran. That was the same conclusion that I had drawn, that this was a war of choice. There was no imminent threat to America. Ms. Gabbard yesterday was trying to say that the President of the United States is the only person that can determine imminent nature of a threat. That's just factually wrong, legally wrong, policy wrong. The intelligence community is supposed to provide those assessments, and then the president can make a judgment. But she somehow says it's all up to the president. And clearly she was uncomfortable because she literally omitted part of her written testimony that was presented the night before that indicated, in her written testimony, she indicated that she didn't think Iran was moving towards a nuclear weapon. She conveniently did not use that paragraph in her oral testimony. I pressed her on it. She had a lame excuse saying she was just trying to save time, when obviously it was the case she did not want to say the quiet part out loud, that there was no imminent threat and that this is a war of choice. That would have put her in direct conflict with the president. So this same group of people are appearing before the House committee today, and we'll get readouts as that go on later in the day. Staying on the Iran war, where, again, we're now on day 18, 19, 20, somewhere in there, where my fear is we've met none of the four goals the president has laid out. Regime change, obviously not the case. We've got a worse supreme leader than before. Getting Iran's enriched uranium, no way you can do that without boots on the ground. I'm not sure Americans want to send their sons and daughters to a ground war in the Middle East again. Eliminating all of Iran's missile and drone capacity. We have taken down a lot of their missiles. That is good news. But the drone capacity is still out there. And the remarkable thing again here is we are using, the Iranian drones cost $50,000 a piece. We are using missiles that cost $2.4 million a piece to shoot down their drones. We don't have enough of those missiles. Yet the one country that could actually help us in this, the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians have figured out a way at a cost of less than $5,000 a drone to shoot down the Iranian drones. They offered that technology and tools to America in December, and this White House turned them down. So we have not met the goal, and unfortunately, we're not using the best tools possible. And then finally, the question of are we going to destroy all the Iranian Navy? I think we destroyed a lot of the surface ships of the Iranian Navy, but they still got hundreds of these speedboats that can close the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's oil goes through. And the proof in terms of how effective we've been on that is, unfortunately, the Strait of Hormuz is closed right now. And gas prices in Virginia have gone up 90 cents a gallon since 2.5 weeks ago when the war started. And making this matter kind of closer to home as well is what's happening on the USS Ford and many of the other ships that are in the region that are home ported in Virginia. The USS Ford, which is now about to be on one of the longest deployments in modern naval history. We had a major fire on the Ford. It took a couple days to extinguish. Thank God nobody was killed. But we've now got sailors without beds because the beds burnt up. We've got reports of the toilets not working. When you have a ship out deployed this long, things are going to break. That's why the deployments are usually a shorter period of time. And I think about the sailors who are doing their duty. But when the president says he's going to know when to declare victory when he feels it in his bones, if you're a sailor on the Ford and you hear your commander-in-chief saying it's going to be arbitrarily up to him when he declares there is an imminent threat or when he feels it in his bones that we've done enough, what kind of confidence does that give you who have been, again, on the longest deployment in modern naval history? And then finally, the floor of the Senate is occupied by the Republicans at this point on the so-called Save America Act, which is frankly the biggest effort to disenfranchise voters in many decades. Let's go through quickly on this. I strongly support voter ID for elections. We've got voter ID laws in Virginia. You've got to present a picture ID. So what is the problem? This SAVE Act would literally say that every individual, particularly women who've changed their names when they got married, would have to go back and find their birth certificate or marriage license and go back and re-register to vote. Or get a passport. About 40% of Virginians don't have passports, and that would cost about $150 a piece to vote, and we'd have to turn over all of our voter rolls to DHS, and I would not trust DHS at this point to not manipulate those voter rolls and knock people off the ballot arbitrarily, knock them off the voting list arbitrarily. This bill is not going to pass. There's not anywhere near the 60-vote majority needed. So instead of talking about lowering cost, lowering the price of gasoline, lowering the price of groceries that have been affected by the Trump tariffs, lowering the price of manufactured goods, again, affected by Trump tariffs, we are wasting time on a bill that's not going to pass and that frankly would disenfranchise literally millions of Virginians and tens of millions of Americans. So we'll see when this kind of political theater comes to an end. Gone a little long, but why don't I turn it over to Catherine and I'll start taking your questions.
The first question is from Mitchell with WTOP.
Hi, Senator. Good morning. As always, thanks for joining us. You anticipated my question related to identifying an imminent threat, so I wanted to move on to this report and kind of a confirmation from the Defense Secretary Hegseth today that they may seek an additional $200 billion related to the war. That compares to what was talked about just a few weeks ago of $50 billion. I wanted to get your reaction to that and what you think Democrats might do in connection with that, and also the fact that the war is now apparently expanding to energy infrastructure in Iran and elsewhere in the Middle East.
Well, first of all, remember the Defense Department got a huge plus up, hundreds of billions of dollars, last summer in the bill that provided tax cuts for the wealthy and cut off health care for millions. In that bill, there was also a huge plus up for the DOD. I want my war fighters who don't have a choice in this, if they're ordered into combat by the president on this war of choice, we got to make sure that they are adequately equipped. But if the president's going to start a war of choice, he should have come to Congress and come to the American people and made the case. He did not. So I'm very reluctant to provide additional funding for this war of choice until the president lays out what we're trying to accomplish and when we're going to be done with it. What will meet his goal of having an accomplished mission. And instead, we're seeing, as you point out, Mitchell, that this is getting worse because when you destroy energy infrastructure, whether it's the gas fields in Qatar or the gas fields in Iran, when you blow up the energy infrastructure in the region, 20% of the oil goes through there, but not just oil, fertilizer. Basis for fertilizer comes out of that region. I talked to a farmer in Amelia County a few days ago. He's already had fertilizer costs go up 40%. When you destroy that infrastructure, you can't turn it back on overnight. So I think Americans are going to be soon seeing $4 a gallon gasoline. And even once this war stops, we're going to see it for a long time to come. Because when you destroy the energy infrastructure, it'll take months, if not years, to rebuild. This is what happens when you don't have a clear plan. This is what happens when Donald Trump said, oh my gosh, he didn't think the Iranians would close the Strait of Hormuz, or he didn't think the Iranians would strike the other countries in the Gulf region. If he didn't think that, then he has not been fully briefed by our intelligence community, because everyone in the intelligence community knew that if a war was started, Iran would strike those neighboring countries and close down the Strait of Hormuz. That is their ace card. So again, he was either not briefed by incompetent leadership, or he was briefed and once again just chose to ignore it. But this is going to be a problem, even if there is a declaration of victory, that is going to haunt American consumers for months and months to come with record high gas prices. Again, all based upon a war of choice, because there was no imminent threat to America.
Our next question is from Tyler with 8 News.
Hi, Senator. Thanks for taking a couple minutes to do this. I want to ask you a little off-topic question, but earlier this week, the Postmaster General said that the post office would run out of money in a year, and they're asking Congress to approve the post office's ability to borrow more. I wonder if that's something you support, and then I know they're also talking about raising postage prices. I know that's not under the purview of Congress, but is that something you would support as well?
We have huge problems at the post office, and some of it may be the post office's fault, but a lot of it's just the fact that the nature of how we send information has changed. You know, how much first-class mail do any of us send anymore? It's much easier to send things online, or we've got competitors like FedEx and UPS who can deliver quicker. The irony being that oftentimes for that last mile in really remote places, it's not the FedEx truck that shows up, it's the post office that has to carry that last mile. So I want to see the proposal, if they come forward, on how we get the post office back on a sound business footing. Here's the amazing thing, though. The former Postmaster General, Mr. DeGioia, who was a Trump appointee in his first term, and at first I was strongly against Mr. DeGioia. I can remember some of the disruption that was caused in Richmond with mail being slow in Charlottesville. And I was pretty much against him. But I found in Mr. DeGioia actually somebody that was practical, that had a business plan, and he was slowly turning the operations around. He even had support of the postal unions. You know what he got for that? For actually doing his job, keeping his head down. He got fired by Trump at the beginning of his second term. I have no idea about whether this new Postmaster General is competent or incompetent. So I'll look at that when they put a proposal forward. But I do know this, in many of our communities in Virginia, you get more starting pay if you go to work for Chick-fil-A than you do at the post office. The post office job used to be a path to middle class. You didn't make as much money maybe, but you got good benefits and there was stability. Now with the kind of ongoing assault on the federal workforce and the fact that this president disrespects federal workers or anybody that does government work, it is a lot harder for the post office to hire in new people and to keep people. So you've got a business model that's radically changed. You've got a job that's not as attractive as it used to be. And you've got this shift in management back and forth. So I know the Americans, we all love our mail. But I do understand that the basic business proposition here is going to have to be reviewed.
Our next question is from John with Fredericksburg Free Press.
Hi, Senator. Appreciate your time. We're coming up in Fredericksburg on the 1-year anniversary of the VA clinic opening in Spotsylvania. Last time I heard you talk about this, you had a lot of concerns. Just wanted to get your updated thoughts on that operation.
Well, John, I remember being at the opening. What a great building. What a great amount of services being offered. And boy, it was a long time coming. It took way too long. The federal procurement process, we hit lots of bumps, but it finally got open because we've got such a growing amount of veterans in the greater Fredericksburg area. One of the things I expressed concerns, though, about a year ago was that even at that point, we only had about a third of the staffing filled. And my understanding is now the VA is still having a hard time staffing. Now, this has been a long-term problem. I see it at the Richmond VA, I saw it at the Hampton VA. The VA never plays full market rates, particularly for doctors, so you've got a lot of turnover. But people would go to work for the VA because, one, the mission, terribly important, serving our veterans. Two, again, the fact that this was a stable job. While you might not get as much pay, you had job security. Well, all of that job security and stability has completely been upended by this Trump administration, by the DOGE efforts, by the fact that initially they were going to cut literally hundreds of thousands of VA workers. It's really hard to make the case whether to go to work for the VA or the post office or the CIA even at this point, when you've got an administration that has basically declared war on federal workers. When you've got the director of the OMB, Mr. Vogt, saying his job was to traumatize, his words, not mine, the federal workforce. And I think the federal workforce is traumatized, and it's really hard to recruit. And the unfortunate thing, after this, hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, I'm not sure our veterans in the greater Fredericksburg area are getting the service they have earned and they deserve, because it's so tough to get people to go to work for the VA right now. Some of that can be dealt with some upgrade in pay, but ultimately it's going to take an administration that does not have kind of a war against federal workers to be able to get to the staffing levels we need, both at Fredericksburg and at the new facility down in Hampton Roads.
Our next question is from Coulter with WTKR. Coulter, are you there? Okay, our next question is from Michaela with WDBJ7.
Yes. Hi, Senator Warner. As you know, there is a man from our region who's currently in prison in Russia, and you've joined Senator Kaine and Representative Klein to urge the State Department to designate him as being wrongfully detained. Why is it important to advocate for him and his family, and why has he not yet been labeled a political prisoner given the circumstances of his detention?
Well, I know about Mr. Zimmerman. I believe he grew up in Salem. I've heard about his story. And, unfortunately, this is what Russia does. Russia grabs any American they can and holds them as hostages for trade. Whether it's trading an American, it feels like Mr. Zimmerman did nothing wrong, to trade him for Russian spies, to trade him for other political purposes. And I've been very disappointed this Trump administration has not focused more on getting Americans out of custody. I believe we got the former WNBA star and Paul Whelan out in an exchange over a year ago. But this is what Putin does, and my concern is you've got a president who seems to be buddy-buddy oftentimes with Mr. Putin for strange and unknown reasons. And I am concerned that Americans held in Russia, and it's not just Mr. Zimmerman, I think the number is close to double digits, aren't getting the attention and the focus of the State Department they deserve. I'm going to keep the pressure on until Mr. Zimmerman gets home and gets reunited with his family in the Roanoke Valley. But we've got to have the administration step up on this and make it a higher priority.
Our next question is from Michelle with Northern Neck News.
Good morning, Senator. In response to comments from Joe Kent's resignation, Speaker Mike Johnson said the Gang of Eight all had briefings. You all understood there was clearly an imminent threat, that Iran was building weapons at a rate that was outpacing the U.S. and its allies in the region, and you all knew that they were planning to fire on Americans. He said Kent wasn't in that loop. So you stated that there's no imminent threat now, but can you confirm whether evidence was initially presented to the Gang of Eight that was at least arguing an imminent threat?
Yeah,
and, what was that the understanding at that time? And also, of course, there are the fuel prices, but are there any impacts specifically that Virginia should be bracing for from this war?
Well, first of all, the Speaker is factually wrong. There was no imminent threat to America. The intelligence was consistent. that Iran, which has been a bad actor for 47 years, I shed no tears over the loss of its leadership, but there was no imminent threat. Whether it was on the nuclear basis, which again, even Director Gabbard, Trump's own Director of National Intelligence, had in her testimony yesterday, or her senior advisor, Mr. Kent, who I disagreed with on virtually everything, but told the truth and resigned and now is under FBI investigation. This was a war of choice chosen by Donald Trump at this moment in time. If you want to start a war of choice, your obligation is to come to the American people and the Congress and ask for a declaration of war. He did neither of those things. Anyone that tells you differently about an imminent threat is not telling the truth. I was in those briefings. I follow this more closely than almost any other member of Congress, and those are the facts validated by, again, testimony from Trump's own intelligence leadership as recently as yesterday. In terms of how this is going to affect Virginians, well, we've got 90 cents a gallon gas price increase already. I think the average went from $2.81 to about $3.80 now. I think we'll see it go to $4 shortly. We have seen Northern Neck's got a lot of farming community. We've seen the price of fertilizer go up 40% because most of the raw materials that go into fertilizer go through the Strait of Hormuz. We have seen the need for aluminum, and aluminum is used in many, many products. You think about all the aluminum used in breweries, for example. All of those costs are going up dramatically because of the basic metals that are based in aluminum, again, come from that region in the Middle East. And how Virginia is going to face this more dramatically than other states, we have a higher concentration of military personnel. I don't have the figure, but on a per capita basis, I bet you we've got more troops deployed in the Middle East than any other state. We obviously know that with the Ford and many of the ships that are home ported in Norfolk. They are in harm's way. Thank God we've only seen 13 service members, but we've had over 200 wounded, many of them gravely, that are now at a hospital in Germany. So whether you're a member of the military, whether you're a driver that see your gas prices go up, whether you're a farmer, whether you see your fertilizer prices go up, these are all the immediate effects of a war of choice. And again, I'll just say respectfully, anyone that says this was not a war of choice hasn't seen or read the intelligence, because again, just take the testimony from Trump's own intelligence community yesterday when Tulsi Gabbard tried to say, well, even though we might not thought it was imminent, if the president feels it in his bones, that he gets to decide that individually and arbitrarily. That is not the way that our Constitution set up the process for going to war. You have to get the assent of Congress. You have to convince the American people. He did nothing. Under her reading, there would be no restraints on Donald Trump deciding any country is an imminent threat to America and then launching another war. That is unsafe, it is irresponsible, and it's not what the American people want.
Okay, back here in the Live Impact News studio as Senator Warner continues his press conference, but we got to watch a large portion of that from yesterday afternoon. Obviously, the topic continues to be the war in Iran. The focus of that press conference and many that we've seen. But after the break, we're going to move on to another major focus that is drawing the attention of Congress. That is the SAVE Act. More on that coming up right after this. Back here in the Live Impact News studio, we have just about 26 minutes left in our show. This show has actually moved along rather quickly. I guess that's just the Friday of it all that is kind of pushing us towards a more rapid conclusion than it normally feels like we get to. But we want to spend some time talking about the SAVE Act. This has obviously been a massive point of debate in Congress since Tuesday. It's an act that would change voter eligibility rules regarding the identification that people need to show in order to vote. It would require proof of citizenship in order to register, such as a passport or a birth certificate. And it has been opposed by many Democrats, calling it voter suppression. But it is something that President Donald Trump has said he will not sign any other bills until the SAVE Act is passed. A lot of pressure on Congress from President Trump to get that bill passed before the midterms to come in the wintertime, or in the fall, I suppose, in November. So we're going to listen in on a couple of arguments that were made today. Both John Thune, the House Majority Leader, the Senate Majority Leader, and Chuck Schumer as well, the Senate Minority Leader. Let's listen to one official from each side discussing the SAVE Act.
The Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to proceed to calendar number 321 HR. Make sure I read this right. 311 HR 7147.
The clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar 311 HR 7147, an act making consolidated appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2026, and for other purposes.
Mr. President, I said at the beginning of this debate that I was going to use the word common sense a lot. And that's because the Save America Act unites a bunch of common sense policies, the kind of things that are just intuitively obvious, or at least they should be, and should be getting 80 to 90 votes or more here in the Senate. I've talked at length this week about common sense election policies like showing a photo ID at the polls and demonstrating that you're an American citizen. In other words, eligible to vote when you register. Today I want to talk about a couple of other common sense policies in this bill. In this case, not about protecting our elections, but about protecting our youth. Mr. President, in recent years, we have seen men, biological men, who identify as women take up spaces in athletics meant for actual women and girls. And this is happening across a range of sports. Track, swimming, volleyball, basketball, soccer, softball, and the list goes on. Now, I don't think I really need to tell anyone the problems with that. They're pretty obvious. There is the physical danger, of course, that can be posed to women by men competing in their sports. But more than that, Mr. President, this is an issue of fairness and equality. At the most basic level, every roster spot that goes to a male is a roster spot that doesn't go to a female. That's a high school girl who's lost out on the chance to play high school sports because a male has taken up her space. And for those women who are on the roster, the presence of a male on the team can and frequently does rob them of opportunities to excel. The simple, biological, scientific fact is that men possess physical advantages when it comes to sports. Things like greater muscle mass and greater aerobic power. And that means that, by and large, men are likely to dominate in women's sports, taking wins and medal opportunities away from women. And it's not just about the unfairness of losing out on a place on the podium. Being knocked out of medal contention can mean the loss of things like college scholarships, As one female runner who was robbed of multiple wins by a biological male described the situation, and I quote, "It robs girls of the chance to race in front of college scouts who show up for elite meets and to compete for the scholarships and opportunities that come with college recruitment. I'll never know how my own college recruitment was impacted by losing those 4 state championship titles to a male. When colleges looked at my record, they didn't see the fastest girl in Connecticut. They saw a second or a third place runner," end quote. Let me read that again, Mr. President. When colleges looked at my record, they didn't see the fastest girl in Connecticut. They saw a second or a third place runner. Mr. President, that's unconscionable. And what's even more unconscionable is that my Democrat colleagues are apparently okay with allowing this to happen. With the way they talk about themselves as defenders of women's rights, you would think they would be the very first people up to bat for fairness and equality for female athletes. But they're not. Last March, the Senate took up the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, legislation to ensure that women, and women only, participate in women's sports at federally funded educational institutions. And every single one of my Democrat colleagues voted against the bill. Not one Democrat had the courage to say that women's sports are for women. Mr. President, as the father of 2 female athletes and grandfather to a granddaughter who started playing sports, I feel pretty passionately about the subject. I'm grateful for the tremendous strides that have been made in women's athletic programs over the past half century. And I cannot believe that one half of the United States Senate is apparently content to see those gains undermined by allowing men to take up places in sports meant for women. With the Save America Act, Democrats are getting another chance to vote for legislation that would protect women's sports. It would be nice if this time they had the courage to stand up for female athletes. Mr. President, I wish this were the only issue, the only consequence of radical transgender ideology that we had to worry about. But as bad as it is for a female athlete to lose out on a college scholarship because her achievements are overshadowed by those of a biological male, the subjection of children to gender transition procedures is even worse. Mr. President, in recent years, substantial numbers of children diagnosed with gender dysphoria have been prescribed puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and in the most extreme cases been approved for irreversible surgical procedures that permanently mutilate their bodies. And all of this has been done with little to no scientific evidence to support these dramatic interventions. The Cass Review, a landmark comprehensive study on medicine, gender issues, and youth, conducted in Great Britain, repeatedly highlights the lack of scientific evidence to support gender transition procedures for minors. And thanks in substantial part to that review, Britain's National Science Service decided to largely discontinue providing puberty blockers to children. And Britain's not the only European country that has reined in its provision of gender transition procedures for minors. Finland, Sweden, and Denmark have also done so. And a New York Times piece notes that there is reason to believe that there are other European countries that may follow suit. Meanwhile, both the American Society of Plastic Surgeons and the American Medical Association have come out against surgical gender transition procedures for minors, noting the lack of evidence to support their use. Mr. President, it's become very clear that we simply do not have substantial scientific evidence to suggest that gender transition procedures benefit children. What we do have, however, is scientific knowledge of how dangerous these procedures can be. And the list of side effects is long and serious. A 2025 report from the Department of Health and Human Services notes that side effects for gender transition procedures can include infertility, loss of bone density, heart disease, and metabolic disorders, surgical complications, negative cognitive impacts, psychiatric disorders, and more. It is unthinkable that we're subjecting children to these dangers before they can have any real understanding of what they're consenting to. 12 and 13-year-olds, Mr. President, cannot understand what it will mean to possibly damage their bones for the long term. 14 and 15-year-olds are not capable of comprehending what giving up their fertility could mean. That's because they're children, Mr. President. They're still changing and growing and developing. And through no fault of their own, they simply don't have the experience and knowledge to grasp the full magnitude of what they're consenting to. Mr. President, the Senate's been officially debating the Save America Act, which would ban gender transition procedures for minors since Tuesday. And I've been struck by the near total silence of my Democrat colleagues on this issue during this debate. Despite their embrace of the extremes of radical gender ideology, witness the refusal of even one Democrat to stand up for women in sports. I'm not sure I've seen a single Democrat come to the floor to defend gender transition procedures for minors. Now, they could just be keeping their powder dry for now, but I have to wonder if maybe some Democrats are reluctant to publicly advocate for subjecting children to, in many cases, irreversible medical procedures backed up by little scientific evidence with a whole host of serious long-term side effects. Open the 2025 HHS report on gender transition for children, and you come across this horrifying passage, and I quote, Mr. President, "In many areas of medicine, treatments are first established as safe and effective in adults before being extended to pediatric populations. In this case, however, the opposite occurred. Clinician researchers developed the pediatric medical transition protocol in response to disappointing psychosocial outcomes in adults who underwent medical transition," end quote. Let me just say that again, Mr. President. Clinician researchers developed the pediatric medical transition protocol in response to disappointing psychosocial outcomes in adults who underwent medical transition. We've essentially been using children as guinea pigs, Mr. President. It's unconscionable, and it should stop now. The Save America Act will give every member of this body a chance to take a stand against the abuse of children. And I urge every member of this body to vote to protect children from further harm. Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Osterbrooks.
President.
The Democratic leader.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objections.
Mr. President, the chaos at TSA is reaching a boiling point. We need to reopen it as quickly as possible. That is what Senate Democrats are intent on doing. So tomorrow, the Senate will take a very simple procedural vote on beginning to reopen TSA, which Democrats are leading. Tomorrow, America will see the matter crystal clear. Which senators want to open up TSA, pay TSA workers, and end the chaos at our airports, and which senators are going to block TSA funding yet again. If you want to open up TSA, vote yes tomorrow. Every previous vote offered by the Republicans has tied TSA funding to also continue funding for ICE without any reform of ICE. This is different. This doesn't tie the TSA to ICE funding because ICE funding is controversial. This does not make the workers at our airports or the passengers at our airports hostages. Republicans are saying, unless you pass ICE as is without reform, we're not going to help the TSA workers get paid and reduce the lines at the airport. We are saying, just do it, no ands, ifs, or buts. Negotiations to rein in ICE and end the violence still have a way to go. There are some very deep disagreements. Republicans still have not accepted that the American people want legislation, real legislation, to ensure the kind of brutality we saw in Minneapolis can't happen again. But in the meantime, Republicans do not need to hold the rest of these agencies hostage, including TSA. To my Republican colleagues, we both see the chaos at TSA. We both know and would admit there's a lot more work to do on ICE. There is no good reason to keep holding TSA hostage. There is no good reason to reject our proposal to fund it. We are going to hold this vote tomorrow, and I urge my Republican colleagues to vote yes. On SAVE. The Senate's in session today, and all we're really doing is wasting time on a voter suppression bill written only to appease the fringe elements of the MAGA base. With so many problems facing our country, with the cost of living so high, with people struggling to make ends meet, with a war going on in Iran, Republicans instead are choosing to spend time making it harder for citizens to vote. This is exactly what the SAVE Act is designed to do. It is designed to make it harder for citizens to vote. Do not listen to the Republican talking points about voter ID. That's a ruse. Underneath the surface, the SAVE Act is a voter purge bill. Most of its core elements don't even talk about voter ID. They want to make it harder to vote, they want to make it harder to register to vote than it is to register to buy an AR-15. MAGA Republicans want to force every single state in America to submit their voter rolls to the Department of Homeland Security. They want Americans' information to be run through an algorithm that Elon Musk and Doge could use to kick eligible citizens, eligible American citizens, off the voter rolls without them even knowing they were kicked off. When you show up at the polling place, they say, Mr. Jones, Ms. Smith, you're not on the registry. You're no longer on the registry. And you say, why? And say, well, you'll have to go find out. That's a disgrace. That's undoing what is deeply American, the right to vote. They want to make registering to vote a bureaucratic nightmare. They want to end vote by mail, end registering online, end registering on college campuses and in churches, and even end registering at the DMV, where, of course, you have to show ID. That is what the SAVE Act is, and Republicans know it. They know if the American people are given a fair chance to make their voices heard, Republicans are in trouble. On Iran. Thanks to Donald Trump's war with Iran, gas prices are now nearing $4 a gallon. Experts predict that this weekend, gasoline will cross the $4 threshold, the $4 a gallon threshold. In just the last month, gas prices have gone up by $1 a gallon. Brent crude is hovering around $108 a barrel, much higher than it's been. And Donald Trump has the gall to say the prices are not that bad. You hear that, America? Donald Trump is telling you $4 gas is not that bad. What bubble does he live in? How often does he fill up his car with gasoline? When Donald Trump says that the prices are not that bad, who's he kidding? He's speaking like a billionaire. America is being led into war by Marie Antoinette. And then Kevin Hassett, the top economic advisor to Trump, says Americans' pain is the least, quote, the least of our concern right now. Can you believe this? The highest economic advisor in the Trump administration says Americans' pain is the least of our concerns right now. If there's anything that shows how out of touch Donald Trump and his minions are out of touch, that's it right there. Trump and his acolytes are unbelievable. They're so clueless. They're in a bubble. Meanwhile, the war with Iran is expanding. Iranian strikes on Qatar's energy structure have knocked out 17% of the country's LNG export capacity. Qatar Energy says 2 LNG trains could be sidelined for 3 to 5 years, a staggering blow to global energy markets. In other words, even if this war ended tomorrow, and there are no signs it's anywhere close to ending.
All right, we return to the Live Impact studio after hearing from Chuck Schumer and John Thune. Now, we're talking about the SAVE Act, and the SAVE Act has been framed through the impacts that it would have on voter registration and the process of voting itself. But if you noticed, John Thune talked almost exclusively about transgender rights and restrictions on transgender participation in sports. Why was that his focus? Well, there has been a push to add language to the legislation that would both prohibit transgender athletes from playing on sports teams aligned with their gender identity and language that would ban gender-affirming care. Surgeries associated with transgender care appears to be the aim. Trump noted, in quotes, transgender mutilation of our children as a part of the language. And so those things looking to be certain Republican officials as well as President Trump, by all reports, looking to add those things to this legislation, which is why you heard John Thune focus on that so much in his particular portion of debate there. This is something that has long been with a heavy focus on that voter registration and voter identification, but there has been a push now to add language to the legislation that would impact the transgender community. So that a part of this as well now. But that'll do it for our coverage of that for today. It certainly won't be the last we hear of the SAVE Act in our general news coverage going forward. But we will get back to that next week because there's 4 minutes left on our Friday show, which means we welcome the People's producer, Nia Campbell, to the stage now so that we can stretch a little bit and explore some other parts of society since we've had such a heavy focus on hard news this week. Nia, what do you got for us?
Yes, all right. So for today, for our Friday headlines, we're starting off with Sinners. They had an amazing run this award season, and we're just going to talk a little bit about how the movie made history at the 98th Academy Awards. Let me put up our side panel. Here we go. So Sinners made history at the 98th Academy Awards earlier this week, earning 16 nominations and winning 4 Oscars. Best Actor goes to Michael B. Jordan, making him the 6th black man to win in this category, keeping in mind that the Oscars has been around since 1929. We got Best Original Screenplay to Ryan Coogler, Best Cinematography to Autumn Duroid-Archipel, I want to make sure I'm saying that right, who made history as the first woman to win Best Cinematography, and then Best Original Score to Ludwig Göransson.
And Ludwig has won quite a few Oscars already going into this Oscars, but let's focus on all that history that you mentioned there just now, okay? First of all, 16 nominations at the Oscars, the most ever. No film has ever been nominated for more awards at the most prestigious cinema award ceremony ever than Sinners. Sinners is a completely original production. Obviously, there are influences on the movie, but from the mind of Ryan Coogler comes this historic achievement that has dominated the box office and award season. Ryan Coogler gets his first Oscar. I have a feeling there will be another Oscar and maybe a couple more Oscars in his future.
Oh, yeah.
But Nia, I want to talk about Michael B. Jordan. Give me your Michael B. Jordan history. Have you been a fan for a long time? Did you just become a fan during Sinners? Because this guy winning Best Actor was the moment of the night, in my opinion.
I would say I am a newer Michael B. Jordan stan. I wasn't on the Creed train when that was popping and all that, but I am now going back and refreshing myself and now watching his older films.
Have you seen Creed?
I'm not yet.
So you're going to watch Creed soon?
Yes.
And that's a classic.
Creed 4.
There is a Creed 1, there's a Creed 2, there's a Creed 3, which was also directed by Michael B. Jordan, and I have seen announcements of a Creed 4, but I haven't seen it confirmed by the studio or anything like that. But I have also seen rumors of a Creed 4. So this guy is directing films, he's winning Best Actor Oscars, and he now has become, I think, one of the preeminent movie stars in the world. And when you talk about under 40, I think it's him and Chalamet, and that's it. And he beat Chalamet for this Best Actor Oscar. Pretty impressive stuff. You've never seen Friday Night Lights?
I have not, but we have to get to our other headlines.
Okay. I could talk about Michael B. Jordan all day. What a win. The Smokestack Twins for life.
Yes. Okay, so for number 2, we have ABC canceling Bachelorette season with Taylor Frankie Paul after the virality of the striking 2023 video of her and her former partner. ABC scrubbed the upcoming season 3 days before it was planned to premiere. Trigger warning for any domestic violence victims and survivors out there. The video of Taylor of her punching, kicking, and throwing chairs at her former partner as her younger daughter watched and cried. ABC released a statement and saying, in light of the newly released video just surfaced today, we have made the decision to not move forward with the new season of Bachelor at this time.
All right. Obviously, this is an ABC station, so that is a program that we often tease to and that often will come on before our broadcast. A massive property for ABC canceled after some pretty terrible things came to light regarding domestic violence. Obviously, the thought of the television program is secondary to the family and the loved ones that are involved of anyone who was a victim in that domestic violence situation, of anyone who was hurt in that situation. So, no Bachelorette this season. We'll see where the franchise goes from here. And that might do it for us, Naya. Yes?
Yeah.
You want to sign off?
That's going to do it. We'll see you next week.
Very nice. Very nice. See you Monday, everybody.